On July 12th, 2018, at 3 p.m., the world came to an end. A terrible storm had broken out, and thunderstorms began to roll over the city. And behind it all was one unknown goddess, to be in the thick of things. She was going to destroy the world. And at one point, she launched large meteorites at the earth. The guy who was there saw the rock flying straight at the girl and gave his life to save her. He pushed her away, and the moment reminded the goddess of a memory of the past, of a man who had once done the same. He stumbled, and there was no time to escape death somehow. The meteorite flew straight at him. But suddenly something happened, and he found himself in a place unknown to him, which was very crowded, and afterwards he passed out again. The next time he regained consciousness, the guy was in the body of an infant who had recently shit himself. Some girl swaddled him and held him close to her. He was trapped in a child's body, but with a mind of his own. The realization of what was happening left him in severe shock, but all he could do was cry. The woman began to soothe the infant, but when nothing helped, she thought he was hungry and proceeded to breastfeed. He immediately sucked on it and experienced complete pleasure. After that, his infant life began. He was bathed and cared for. He kept wondering what had happened. It was probably the after effects of the displacement. He only had a fraction of his memory. All he remembered was the end of the world and that woman. Time passed, but he still couldn't remember everything. But in spite of everything that was going on, he began to notice that the woman was treating him very well. Since then, a whole 5 years have passed, and the boy has grown older, but still continued to love drinking breast milk. She had been good to him all these years. His memory still hadn't fully returned, but deep in his heart, he was beginning to accept his new mother. He hadn't had the opportunity to cherish his kin in his past life before, but this time he was going to protect that kin. He reflected on the fact that he had neglected his mother's love in a past life. But he was an adult, and she demanded that he find a wife all the time. She never knocked on the door before entering, and often saw him at his most unfortunate moments. But now things were different, and his new mom loved him more than her whole life. She tried for him always, and cooked for him. But he didn't like it very much, and that's why he liked her milk. He's been in this world for 5 years now, and all he's learned in that time, that this world was very advanced. But it was in this village with no Wi-Fi or electricity. But luckily there was a benefit to these elemental spirits. Such crystals were called photocrystals, and in one of them was a picture of his father. But his mother never told him anything about him. His new mother was almost perfect in this new life. Everything was fine except her cooking. But there was one neighbor. Everyone called him Lao Wan. He didn't even have a mustache on his face, but he looked like an old man. And the boy disliked him very much. But he often came to see them on occasion, and this time he came with a present. He caught a lot of fish and decided to share one. He knew it wasn't very often that a girl could afford a meat dinner and brought fresh fish. The boy immediately used his secret pranking technique and asked his mom to get rid of this bad man sooner rather than later. The mother sided with her son and asked Wana to take her fish, for she did not want to accept any help. The boy's behavior had angered Van, and now he was determined to teach him a lesson. He just had to wait a little while. One dark evening, the boy sat and thought about how much he missed the past world, his home, the streets, the river, and the shining moon. But the clouds began to thicken, and almost no light of the moon could be seen as lightning suddenly struck. The boy looked immediately out the window and saw a rather familiar picture. It was like the same day as when he died. It was as if that devil had come back for him again. All this affected his sanity, and his head began to ache very badly. It was splitting, and the pain was unbearable. But suddenly it went away, which was very strange. The boy thought that the best solution now would be to go to sleep. Somewhere in the village, their neighbor Vaughn was coming home. He was very drunk, and he was still angry with the boy. All these years, 5 years to be exact, the girl refused him, and all because of this stinking sucker who always meddles in the wrong business. He even planned to kill the boy and then abuse the girl. He went into their house. He tried to do everything quietly, but the old door made a creaking sound. Right in front of the door was the bed where the boy and his mom slept. The boy heard the creak of the door and began to wake up a little. He assumed that the mouse had probably come back again to steal some food. Without realizing what might have just happened, he didn't even have time to make a sound before Van grabbed him and gagged him. The man put a gag in his mouth and tied his hands, also informing him of his next actions. He was going now to his mother, and after that, to become his stepfather. The boy was in a desperate situation. If only he was in his former body. Though he couldn't fight, at least he was 180 centimeters tall, which would give him a slight advantage. But at that moment, the mom herself woke up and hit Van's head with a wooden stick and even knocked out his tooth. The man looked like a madman, and that didn't stop him in any way. He was going to abuse her despite the fact that she was already awake. The girl was furious. She demanded to let her son go, or else she would fight him. The boy could do nothing but moo through his gag, but despite the fact that he looked like a child, he had lived for 35 years. So he gathered his thoughts and began to think calmly about how to find a solution. He needed to get a knife to get rid of the rope, but his mom had left it on the table, which was too high for him. Juan became even fiercer. Heian guessed that the Yun girl possessed such a cruel side, but it turned him on even more. The guy started to panic a bit and kept thinking only about getting the knife. And suddenly, by some miracle, a knife appeared right in his hand. At the same time, an unknown wanderer was rushing across the rooftops under the cover of night. But in the boy's house further, this horror was going on. The girl demanded that Van leave their home. This brute wouldn't listen to her, and because of the difference in strength, he wasn't going to back down, because he wasn't afraid of her. She had no choice but to threaten to kill him if he came any closer to her. Van began to cry. It was a complete injustice to him, for he had remained kind to her for all 5 years. But she was still not going to accept him. But you can't command your heart. There is no justice in love, and there was no more room in her heart for anyone. Van realized the whole situation and realized that he would get nothing, so he undertook to destroy everything. The boy kept cutting the rope, and he needed some more time. He saw the elemental spirit, and they understood each other at a glance. The spirit flew right up to Van's face and began to shine a bright light at full power, blinding him. During this time, the boy cut the rope already running straight to the man to knock him out. Because of the difference in their bodies, and realized he had to hit the most sensitive spot, his snake, he used his second technique, the chicken knee strike, after he got around to it and decided to help him in his future and make his anus a little wider. After all that awaited this Van next was only prison, where he would be treated just as badly as he wanted to do to June. And while the villain was squirming in pain, the boy struck him with his own fists. But it was unexpected, and Van slammed into the wall with all his might. The impact was too powerful. And all of this was being watched by the very same wanderer. He saw all of this boy's strange abilities. The mother was very frightened. Then the boy came to her and began to calm her down. Afterwards, he thought about it. It was all very strange. He was able to summon a knife, and it was definitely from the old earth. He realized that from the inscriptions on it. And in his right hand was sealed an incredible power. Later that night, Lao Wan was caught by city guards. Criminals who threaten women and children will be treated with special care by their future cellmates. But the next day, and the boy had a very high fever and had a very strange dream. In this dream, the same girl appeared to him and told him that he had traveled through time, and so she had suspended the end of the world. And when he became an adult, he should reach the level of creation and be able to use the heart of his world to replace the corrupted Earth's core and save humanity. Otherwise, she will not stop and will destroy all rotten humanity to give the world a new beginning. No one can escape death, not even his parents. The guy at that moment asked her for one favor. He was crushed by a rock anyway, but if he could save at least one person this way, it would be worth it. And asked her to reward him with some sort of superpower or ability. She fell silent and didn't answer him anything for a long time. He began to feel very uncomfortable. He even thought that she had changed her mind because of his words, and now she would definitely destroy the world. The guy had read a lot of Japanese comics, and so he thought that such a request was not very heavy, because in them people were given more than that. He continued. As much as she wanted to help him, he was very weak. So even with her powers, there wasn't much she could do. First, she was going to strengthen his astral body. His spiritual, elemental, and meta powers would increase several times over. It would also increase the capabilities of his hands, making them more powerful and stronger than those of ordinary people. But it turned out that only his right hand could change, and his left hand was therefore endowed with the ability to summon things from the past world that he had ever touched, but only if those things had no soul. She also sealed all his knowledge of the creation of worlds and his life energy in the ocean of his soul. Everything he will need in the future will be stored there. And as he improves, the seal will be weakened, and gradually the knowledge will be revealed to him. But she told him the whole truth of his death. He didn't really die from hitting a rock, but from being scared, like a child. And so she decided to make him a spirit. It shocked him. Such a stupid death. He hadn't even expected it. And immediately after that, he woke up. Now he knew everything. Why his hands had such abilities, the power of his right hand, and the ability to summon his left hand. Today his seal has weakened, and now he knows how he has traveled through time. Yes, also, some of his memories have come back to him. He was only 5 years old, but he could already train his mental capabilities. He had 3 of the most important methods of inner perfection to choose from, and once he learned one of them, he could make the whole world tremble. He thought about it and decided to start with the basics of taking over heaven and earth. At least it sounded cool. And later he thought to take on the teachings of destroying the laws of the heavens. He felt an incredible surge of strength and energy within him. He felt the powers of heaven and earth permeate his body. He reached level 1 very quickly, though it usually took people almost half a year to do so. He decided to try out his skills and started right away with object control. He was able to lift the vase with just a thought. He also possessed the gift of clairvoyance. He foresaw his mom coming in exactly 3 seconds. She entered his room just in time. She was very frightened when the boy fell ill. But he was on the mend, so she made him porridge. A few days later, they had a very interesting conversation. My mom really wanted him to go to school, but he didn't want to do it at all. But he was small, so the question was rhetorical. He would have gone to school anyway. But there were pluses there, because for good talent, you can study for free and also get awards. Registration day came, and they arrived at the school at its huge gates. They were not the only ones. A large number of parents and their children came there, and much to their dismay, they were the very last in line. There were so many people that were going to register. Suddenly, the boy noticed that there was some sort of second entrance nearby. Most likely it was for the most important guests. In the carriage rode a boy of the same age, only very fat and nasty, from a very rich family. A man standing nearby heard all this and asked him to be quiet. After all, in the carriage was the son of a local rich man, for whom a large sum had been paid, and if they heard, it would be very bad. Unfortunately, this world was no different from Earth in this respect. Even if the poor tried hard or had some talents, it would not advance them in the queue. These were the words of the guards that lined up and formed an aisle for their master, who was carrying a bag of money. Then an ingenious plan arose in the young man's mind to use these jewels to make a speedy way in. He made these stones move chaotically inside the sack with his newly learned ability, and with such force that the sack burst open. And when the diamonds started falling to the ground, all the people standing around rushed to pick them up. So they wouldn't let that asshole through. And while everyone was distracted, he grabbed his mom's hand and ran faster down the aisle. Already inside, everything was happening according to the order of recording, and the examiner called for Xiao Sai to come up to him. He needed to put his hands on this magic ball. If it glowed, or the glow was faint, then the trial would be considered a failure. But if it shone with light, then the test was passed. In this case, the color blue means the law, and red means the system. When the boy touched it, it began to not only glow, but sparkle with a blue bright light. This was something the examiner could not have expected. He was more shocked than ever before. He had never seen such a violent reaction from a balloon in his life. This ball could not withstand such force and cracked. One of the principals said to report this to the head of the establishment as a matter of urgency, for they had gotten a genius. But the boy wasn't happy with the result. He wanted to get into the power system, and the laws of magic were of no interest to him. Then the old man said that after he finished this exam, he would take him to a power test. His mom took the baby and went with him to the thought and magic department. But he kept believing that the old man would come back for him. There he further began to demonstrate his skills and showed a strong affinity with the spirits, summoning a large number of them to him. The old man had not heard of such superior power in centuries. The boy had one last exam before him, the attribution of elemental power. But in addition to that, a very important person wanted to meet him. The provost himself came to personally escort the lad and administer the exam. He was a very powerful mage, and in an instant teleported right behind the boy's back. He immediately determined that the kid had a good talent and combination of strength at such a young age. He was comparable to the level of a hermit already. He would make an excellent thinker in the legislative system, but the boy was determined to become a strong warrior. He wanted to defeat his enemies on the battlefield, like the famous Arthur. No one in this world knew such personalities, but the provost still wanted to help the boy and decided to take him to the power exam. He activated the teleportation spell and asked his mother not to worry about her son. He was only taking him to his exam, and he asked her to stay here for now. But the girl didn't care what place he took there. The main thing was that he would try. They found themselves at the first court, where their overall level of strength would be tested. The boy wondered what his peers were capable of, and thought that with his strong arm, he would have no problem. The provost said the elevator was a little farther away, and for him to go downstairs. His form had already been submitted. He just had to wait in line. But the guy decided to just jump off, since it didn't seem high to him. He immediately noticed the number of participants. There were many more of them here, all vying for a place in the academy. Although the children were still too young, they were all no more than 10 years old, but they were already trying to lift such a large boulder. But that didn't work for everyone. But Toba Tian had no trouble at all. All the girls were enamored with him. He was smart, handsome, and completely perfect. He passed the exam like everyone else, in spite of his marital status. Xiao Sai was outraged by their behavior, because everything would work out as usual, and the girls were looking at the wrong person. He began to break through the crowd to demonstrate his skills, but no one would let him pass. Then he saw something that looked like a rope and decided to grab it. But it wasn't her. It was the girl's tail. There were other races in this world besides humans. She became very angry. She was always being teased like this, and once again she was convinced that there was no one normal among humans. He decided to calm down and give her the right answer so as not to offend her. He knew cats had a tail that was one of the most sensitive places. But O couldn't say that he had mistaken it for a rope. She would get even angrier. The guy decided to start right away by calling her the most beautiful girl and asked her to apologize to him for such a careless act that his hands had done. And as an apology, he offered to become his girlfriend. She hadn't expected that, and even blushed a little, because no one had ever said such nice words to her before. He didn't wait for her answer and invited her to have tea in farewell when she was ready to give him an answer. At this, he corrected his joint and headed briskly towards where the exam was being held. He wanted to see what he was capable of sooner rather than later. In the crowd, everyone was admiring the one who was now on the pedestal, except for Chijeo himself, he that everyone would be shocked when he demonstrated his strength. This boy didn't look 10 years old at all. He had a very strong body, and he lifted this stone with just one hand. It was the brother of the two boys. His name was Lai Li. Snap couldn't stay silent for long and spoke up. He was very bored here, because his peers were definitely small compared to his age. Then one of the guys took him up on it. If he can speak out so boldly, let him go out and try it himself. And that's when it was announced that SIU was coming out next. He was going to take it all out there. But as he climbed up, everyone was discussing him, that he looked very frail, and that he wouldn't even be able to move a millimeter of stone. He grasped with both hands, breathed all the air out of his chest, and began to try with all his might to lift the stone. But his results were very poor. He was only able to lift it a small distance. Catgirl watched him intently, and at the moment of peak tension in that boy's body, he emitted a very familiar scent to her. And she also noticed that last time, he had not introduced himself as his real name. Xiao was shocked. The strength of his two hands was very different, and the power of one hand was not enough for him. He didn't want to embarrass himself in front of everyone at a time like this. He threw it all over his right hand, which did not feel the burden of the stone at all, and little by little began to lift the cobble higher and higher. But he was slightly skewed towards the weak hand and couldn't hold the stone. He held it for too short a time, so he was given the lowest level of strength. The other children took advantage of his shame and ridiculed him. He showed off so much, and in the end he was very weak. He didn't get very upset and just went to the second round of this competition. There was an endurance test, and all participants ran around a circle of the stadium. Seeing this left him extremely displeased. After all, in his previous life, he had also disliked running, and now it was a challenge. He was spotted by those two guys, and at every opportunity he tried to ruin his mood a little bit and was constantly crooked. Then that same cat girl showed up there at the stadium, and the first thing she advised him was to be like her, and that if someone tried to offend him, he should punch him in the face. She was on his side and didn't want him to be laughed at. He looked at her and thought. He had heard somewhere that people like her with mixed blood were called outsiders, and he hadn't met them before. so there weren't many of them in this world, but a mob of children tried to insult her for looking like that too. They thought they were a race between orcs and humans. They also considered them the lowest nation. But CJO thought otherwise. He even on the contrary thought she was cute enough, as well as her ears and tail. He expressed his gratitude for her support. The following contestants were called out. They were XYOSI, Jen Hao, and Li Ji. As soon as the gun went off, the contestants started the race. The guy immediately shot into the lead. The two behind him just couldn't keep up and couldn't even get a little closer to him. Those two were able to finish the exam despite having to run such a full 50 laps. But Snap kept running, not because he wanted to, but because he was able to run very fast in the beginning. But afterwards, his strength began to leave him. He never finished the race. He lost all his strength and felt very dizzy. And afterward, he fell to the ground, and foam began to come out of his mouth. At the same moment, medics rushed there immediately to keep such a young boy alive. This whole situation only caused the rector grief, and also from the cat girl that hoped for him. Then another examiner announced that the third exam was beginning. A test of strength, and all those who did not participate were required to proceed to the next site. What he heard brought him to his senses immediately. A test of strength. It was the very thing he'd been waiting for. At the Impact Strength Competition site was an absorbent magic cube that absorbs physical activity. An ordinary person, even if he uses his full strength, can only leave a small imprint. But the most valuable thing about it is that it can repair damage on its own. This stone is very rare and valuable. The third stage of the competition began, and the first contestant was Sin Lee. The cat girl, she climbed the platform to hit this rock with all her might. She was going to do it so much to get rid of all the bullying from her peers, so they would start to fear her. With her strike, she left a pretty good mark, so that her hand went into the stone a few centimeters. In an instant, all the kids were afraid of her. They had just been mocking her, and now they saw how strong she was. She surprised her result and the examiner, thereby getting the highest level. Two brothers went next, and the first one, John Hao, just embarrassed himself. He couldn't even leave his print. Lee GJ also showed no progress, and only injured his arm. At that time, their older brother, Leia Ali, who possessed a very strong body, was called to the stage. Gathering all his strength in one hand, he dealt quite a lot of damage. The dent was very huge. The rector was very pleased with these results. A large number of promising applicants came this year. These children have not yet started their studies, but already have the physical training of a journeyman. And that boy, Snap Sai, has all the capabilities to reach the level of a hermit. The next one was supposed to be the S.I. Xiao, but he hadn't had a chance to run in yet. He was rushing as fast as he could. When he arrived, everyone was getting a little tired of waiting for him, especially the kids. They just looked at him with disapproval and assumed that, just like the previous times, he wouldn't succeed. The rector was surprised at his zeal. He thought he would give up after his failures. Then the girl examiner called him to come to the stone to demonstrate his strength. Running past this girl, he couldn't help himself and gave her a couple of compliments about her beautiful face and very nice figure. She blushed and felt embarrassed, for she could not expect any child to be able to speak on such adult topics. The provost was determined to see the boy fail again. By giving him this opportunity, he wanted to show him that the world was cruel and that everything did not revolve around him. There was no end to Chieo Sai's amazement. This stone looked very majestic, and there would probably be only a few of them on the entire continent. But as usual, the two brothers didn't let him hit him quietly, and from the crowd started shouting all sorts of nasty things, though it was unfair. The Xiao only spoke out once in their brother's direction. He decided to teach them a lesson. He proposed a bet. If the result of the Snap SI is better than their brother's, they will call him Grandpa for life. And if he wins, they'll call him Grandpa for life. They gladly agreed because they were sure that there was no one cooler than their brother here. Gathering all the strength in his powerful arm, the boy struck straight into the stone. The impact was too powerful, shaking the entire hall, and the stone itself shattered into small pieces. The three brothers all opened their mouths in surprise. He had exceeded their expectations. Catgirl was no less astonished, although she had strong doubts, because Xiao Si's physical training was very poor, and this strike was very strange. And only the rector was utterly horrified. This stone was very valuable, and was the only one in the university. In the rector's office, the best students were gathered to be taken into the academy. Since centuries, it has been the aim of this power school to select outstanding individuals. All of them can be supported and encouraged by the administration. At this moment, the 4 candidates were given a choice, and if the academy could afford it, it would definitely fulfill the student's wish. The boy who came third in the strength competition was chosen to be the first to make the selection. To be a then, heir to an elite family, the boy had made his choice. He wanted unlimited access to the library and to browse rare books, including arcane magic. He was given partial permission. He was given free access to the library, but he could only study arcane magic with the rector's permission, and his early exposure to arcane magic could be bad for his development. But in spite of the prohibition, the lad was pleased with the opportunity he had received. The next one given a possible choice was the cat girl, Ling Feint. That has been persecuted by other peoples, abused and bullied from childhood. Her wish was very simple. All she wanted was free access to the gym. It was an easy wish that the academy would just be able to fulfill. She was promised to be given the keys a little later and shown how to run the simulators. Next was the winner of the strength competition, 10-year-old Lei Li, that at the age of 10 had strength beyond the norm. He asked for something more interesting. He wanted his 2 brothers, who couldn't qualify on their own, to be enrolled, but the rector couldn't take them on. In this world, only the strongest survive. They wouldn't be able to patronize them for life, but the man made an adjustment. He suggested that they would only be taken at his request, but they would have to do the dirty work. He liked that option a lot, because that way he could keep an eye on them. And finally, the very last contender that made it into the winner's circle, because the others simply couldn't pass the power test, Qiao Se. Deep down, the rector was greatly grieved at such a loss of a gem that he was broken by this boy. The boy demanded that after his admission, his mother could live with him. He did not want to leave her alone, but if this demand was not met, he would easily leave the institution. The boy thought that with this answer, he had definitely scared the rector, because he would be afraid if this boy took off. The rector was indignant. He realized at once that this boy was insolent, but his concern for his mother was commendable. He made a decision and allowed all the mothers of these participants to live in the teacher's dormitory. He also asked the girl to stay here to give her the keys to the hall. While they were on their way to their guardians, Xiao Si's mom had a wonderful evening and dinner. As it turned out, one of her teachers invited her to this expensive restaurant for such a beautiful lady to enjoy dinner. This news infuriated CJO. This teacher is now his nemesis, and the boy had no choice but to punch the pervert who wanted to have an affair with his mom. The boy immediately told his mom that they could now live together at the academy, and from such news, she was in great shock. In the hostel, the neighbors kindly accepted and cared for their family, and they also offered my mother occasional dirty work so that she could earn some money. but they paid her well. But of course, there were strange men with dirty intentions. They wanted to watch the goddess they named clean their rooms, but the Nija Si gently hinted to them each time that they should watch their behavior. The boy was periodically late for his studies, but everything had its reasons. There were no such educated people in this world, so the boy could do various part-time jobs. In his past life, he was a professional artist, but his name was differently called Hyue. He drew an infinite number of notebooks and became a god in drawing manga for adults. And he found a great use for it. He sold these mini albums to high school students after their classes were over. And the older children often visited him because his pictures gave them very unusual feelings. One of the boys spent a lot of money from him, so much so that he was even scolded by his parents. And they noticed the guy sitting outside the academy again. This time he had the newest addition to his collection. The eldest was in shock. He was ready to blow all the pocket money he had just gotten today to get more of those pictures. On one of the pages, he depicted a pre-existing personality, the teacher that was taking their last strength exam. And at the same moment she was walking beside her, she was greatly surprised that Chejeo had come running here so quickly, even though class had just ended, and she wondered what they were doing here. She took the album right out of his hands. The boy didn't even have time to think of anything to stop her. The teacher opened the album right to her portrait and was shocked and very much embarrassed by what she saw. The boy realized if he stayed, it would be very bad, so he immediately started running away before she grabbed him. He came across a nursing home that was also located on the academy grounds. He immediately realized that he could also find clients here. Just positioning himself on the floor, he didn't notice how this man appeared. He very quietly approached him from behind. This old man was dressed in similar clothes to the rector and also wore a jewel. The boy began to think that he had met some important person at the university. The smile on that old man's face was getting dirtier and dirtier, which gave the guy hope, but something happened and his face fundamentally changed. He became very angry and surly. He grabbed one of the books and scrutinized it very carefully. Cheo began to think that now he would not be able to get away with it, and perhaps he and his mother would be kicked out of the university. But then he stood up and asked the boy a question. Where did he get such images? When he found out that the boy had drawn it all himself, he was surprised. But still, he reprimanded the boy for wasting his time, because at such a young age he should be studying. And as an elder of the university, he confiscated all his books and threatened him on his way out. If he caught him again, the consequences would be much worse. But Xiao Si thought about it for a bit and realized that things were illogical here because this old man's face was very excited at the beginning. He was tricked and had all his belongings stolen, but when he looked for him, the old man was no longer in the place. Somewhere on the academy grounds, one of the students was subjected to a beating in one of the back alleys. He begged to be released and was willing to give up all his belongings. But it didn't help. Then he started threatening his parents. But if the bully let him go, he wouldn't tell them anything. This villain turned out to be one of the newcomers from the Li family. He didn't want money or his belongings. The reason for his hatred was unknown, and that's when the boy's face almost turned blue and he ran out of air in his lungs. He was approached from the roof of the building by the SNF. He said he shouldn't kill anyone, and especially for someone as young as him, he didn't understand where he got so much anger from. Xiao came down to see him, but Brother Li immediately told him to leave and stay out of his business. Then the boy decided to remind him what he had done. After all, he had enrolled here and asked for his brothers to be taken too. But if this boy dies and it is found out, he will definitely be expelled. He seemed to have come to his senses and left his victim behind, but he had a new plan in mind. Lai Li made one decision that he thought was right in this situation. Since he had been caught doing this, and now there was a witness, he should get rid of him. SNLI assumed that everyone in Li's family was brainless and only understood the language of violence, so he would have to beat him up. The boy activated the speed magic that he had gotten by going through his training. Lei was surprised that his opponent decided to go for hand-to-hand combat. After all, he was good at it compared to Qi Jiao. But with speed magic, he could safely see all his movements. They seemed too slow to him. At that time, Xiao used his new technique, the lightning iron fist that he had obtained while learning how to seize the heavens and earth and refining his own key nature. In addition, this power became red in color and gained an intimidating effect. And now he was going to use it on him to produce his first experience. Lei had no time to dodge. His movements were too fast, so he crossed his arms in front of him and took the whole punch into the block. But the blow was quite strong, and despite his size, he still got a strong push. He was shocked. He had been training his strength and hand-to-hand combat skills since he was 3 years old. And now, some punk kid could take him down. He paid for not 1 liter of sweat to make his body stronger than a 10-year-old's. And now, he's stronger and bigger than a lot of 20-year-old guys. He had fought the people's masters and learned from them. There was no way he was going to lose here. Xiao told his secret. Firstly, they were in the area of his energy sphere, and all of Lei Li's movements were slowed down. And secondly, he began to use the speed of the thunder elemental force, and the speed of his strikes surpassed the opponent's reaction. Xiao knew that Lei wasn't a bad person, but he didn't understand why he wanted that boy dead so badly, and was going to hold him back until he changed his mind. Their fight didn't go unnoticed. A cat girl was watching it all from the roof of the house. Lei analyzed the situation and realized that once again such a trick wouldn't work. As long as Chiejeo was attacking, he was in weightlessness and had no support under his feet. Now it was up to him to intercept his blow before it struck. La was confident of his victory, for his combat experience was superior to that of the SNF. The boy was very frightened. Now he had no way to dodge, and Lei was very close by and could deliver his blow. But Xiao purposely made a frightened face. He blocked the blow with his shield. Lei Li's astonishment was unprecedented. He had never heard that there was a magic shield in this world that could follow a person's movements. All mentors open a magical shield with their hands and cannot move from their seat while doing so. Moreover, they couldn't use any other abilities. This was something impossible, but nothing was impossible for Xiao. Now all he had to do was strike and knock the crap out of Lai's head so that he would change his mind about killing anyone. And with his lightning fast punch, he hit the guy right in the jaw, sending him flying fast to the ground. The boy was very tired. It turned out that this magic shield required a very large amount of elemental mana. But his opponent was also not a weakling. Since losing in the competition, SNL has been practicing a lot studying the world creation technique and has increased his spiritual abilities, and now he could finally try them out in a real fight. So the loss of Li Li was not in vain. He lifted the already exhausted and beaten boy from the ground. He looked like Li Ara, the eldest son of the clan leader. He was going to take him to the doctor to get him some help soon, because if he died, Lai Li would only have more problems. But this buffalo didn't stop, and even after such a blow, he was able to get back on his feet. It was very unexpected. He didn't faint after such a blow, and besides, he must have gone mad with rage. But suddenly, the cat girl entered the conversation. Chiejeo could see what she had under her dress and became embarrassed. She immediately demanded an end to this useless slaughter. She understood perfectly well that he was not gratuitously going to kill this boy. Most likely the reason was because of yesterday. Yesterday, the heir to the Leiara clan embarrassed the younger Lei Lee brothers. They helped clean up the school grounds after school. But this rich boy came there with his friends to mock them, and when they said that their mouths stank like a dung pit, one of the brothers couldn't stand it and hit the asshole over the head with a broom. Leiara could not bear such an insult and ordered his friends to beat them. And in the end, they were beaten by a special brother with the name Xiao Hao. Now he was lying in the medical building and was waiting for a huge medical bill. So Lei wanted to kill him for revenge and also wanted to get his money to cover the treatment. Lei Li couldn't stand it and started yelling at her. She saw everything and didn't even bother to help them. But she had her own reasons for that. She didn't help them just because everyone called her an outsider, including his brothers. And then no one helped her either. Li kept shouting and demanding them to leave quickly, for he had no claim on them, and Leiara had to die. But she didn't care about the big guy. She was only here for one reason, all for him. She wanted to know why he had cheated her of her name then, for his name was not Wang Xiaoming at all. Lei was unhappy that they were being flirtatious at a time like this, and the girl was furious that her speech was interrupted. So she also got into an attacking stance and advised the big guy to take the money and go to his brother's aid. He also started to attack her as well, but she ducked and grabbed his arm. With her other hand, she managed to scratch his face, but he managed to stop her. At that moment, Xiao Shi realized that she would be in trouble if he didn't help her now. He dropped Leiara to the ground, but Lei Li managed to concentrate his strength in his hand and grabbed the girl's head and was about to seal her into the ground. Xiao Sai got there in time and punched right into the guy's fist to prevent him from finishing what he started. Afterward, he took the girl in his arms so she wouldn't fall. But at that moment, the fight was stopped. A teacher came into the alley at the sound of screaming and activated her magic. She restrained the teens' movements with mana fetters, preventing them from moving. That later, she delivered them all to the rector's office, who was very angry when he heard such news. They just arrived at the academy, and they're already having illegal fights. He threatened them with expulsion, but CJO was not going to just listen, he spoke out. He didn't like the fact that this major and his gang hadn't been punished for beating up a boy. He began to think that the university was subject, like everything else in the past world, to such selections that littered with money. This greatly offended the rector. The honor of the university was defamed. He decided to punish the boy using psychological pressure with magic. It was taking a heavy toll on him, getting heavier and heavier by the second. But suddenly there was an unusual aura right behind him that the rector had never seen before. It was a strong counterbalance to his spell. The two students and even the mentor could do nothing about such a force and were mercilessly pressed to the floor. But only JJO could continue to stand on his feet. He wasn't going to retract his words, and only provoked the rector by calling him an old fart. The man realized that this was not going to go well. He tried to explain that the struggle for power among the students of the government is not so simple, and equality is a word that the weak deceive themselves with. The next day, an announcement was posted to punish the three disciples. They were imprisoned in the Tower of Empty Spirits for 30 days because of their willful fighting. At that same time, the tutor came to the rector with a report that Laya Lee's brother had woken up. That was great news, but the university administration was still investigating the case, and maybe they were going to pin all the responsibility for beating up Leiara on Leili. Some of his relatives in management tried to get Leili expelled, but the head of the university prevented it. The Vice Dean tried very hard and was able to negotiate the punishment of Lingxi and Xiaoxi, for they are very talented students, and expelling them would be a huge mistake. After hearing these words, the rector decided that Lei Li could continue studying here, only now they needed to hold out for the entire time. Besides, the Tower of the Void was not the most pleasant place on Earth. There were quite a few ferocious elemental spirits and demons imprisoned in this place. The mentor was greatly worried about them. Even final year students are unable to endure such a long stay there. She was greatly afraid that this trio wouldn't be able to last. But in these troubled times, only strength was the means that would help them survive, and also there they could become much stronger. But the rector believed in them, especially the boy Xiao Si. According to his observations, there were many abilities hidden in his body. They learned about the superb power of the soul to be revealed in the first examination, the tremendous power that destroyed the stone, and also the strange energy that appeared in it yesterday. However, there was something interesting in the secret list that the rector had suddenly received. Since ancient times, this scroll had been distributed only to the strongest and had never been made public to the common people. Many criminals were gathered in it. Xiao Sai's mother seemed so weak. It was hard to imagine her being on this secret list. The black market was willing to pay a reward of 10 billion yuan stones for her capture. And it was a very large sum, even for a criminal. But since her son was currently a student at the academy, they could pretend as if they didn't know anything. Although this guy was constantly poking the rector, but he realized that he had a very big heart, and he would be able to do a lot of good deeds in the future. Therefore, he burned this list. He turned to his mentor and asked her not to tell anyone about the secret scroll he had received. Not even the administration. He should still discuss it with the head of the university. She understood his request, but on leaving she asked him why he cared so much for the children, but continued to look at them with a sullen face. This embarrassed him, and blushing he asked her to leave. At this time, in the Tower of the Void, the guys were fighting mobs of monsters, and in an instant, Xingli had expended a great deal of strength and no longer had time to dodge the monster's attack. But from this horrible situation, she was saved from this horrible situation by Xiao Si. He hit the monster with an electric shock. It was only their first day there, but no matter how many demons they destroyed, there was no end to them. After one pack, new ones appeared. They began to surround them, and it looked like if they didn't kill them, they would definitely end up here from exhaustion. At the same time, the Chijio noticed that the Lin was most likely having a panic attack. He also analyzed Eli Li as well, and that guy was also scared to death. But it was not to be expected. They were still children after all. The boy realized that his only hope was in him. They can't stay here and die, but only he has the strength. He couldn't hold back any longer and summoned more numbers of sharp clerical buttons from planet Earth. And since he must have previously seen these items, they were taken from his best friend's wall, Egghead. He began to scatter them on the ground so that the attacking monsters would start to stab at them and give him some time to buy some time. He turned to Catgirl and asked her to pull herself together, because he wouldn't let her die here and would do anything to keep her here for 30 days. The girl believed him, but she wondered, even though this boy was the same age as them, he made her feel safe, and he did things and thought like an adult. But what kind of summoning magic, it was left a big mystery. Then the CJAO asked if any of the guys had a secret weapon with them. That could help them right now. After all, what he scattered would help them for a very small amount of time. As it turns out, Catgirl had taken a small purse with her before they were locked in here. There was supposed to be a poison dagger that her mom had given her. She'd done it on purpose, so the girl could protect herself from perverts and strange men. That should have remedied their situation a bit, and Chiediao asked for the purse to be tossed to him. Afterward, he turned to Lei Li. Even though he hated him, the big guy should stick to his plan so he could return to his brothers sooner. They couldn't fight here all the time, so the big guy had no choice and obeyed. He asked them to stand behind him so the boy could activate the protective sphere. He wouldn't be able to hold it for long, so he needed to quickly explain his plan. They stood next to the SNWO, and he activated the shield. Now they were in the center, and they were surrounded by monsters on each side. The boy took the poison daggers out of his bag and explained his plan to the boys, and Lei Li didn't like him at all. He thought it was beneath his dignity, but he had a choice. Either honor or the half-dead brothers waiting for him outside. After getting everyone's consent, they started to realize the plan of the SNU, but Lei Li still felt disgusted. He didn't like the fact that he would serve as a backup battery of energy for the SNF in this plan. A gap had appeared in the shield, and Lin Sai had to prevent the monsters from trying to run in, while Xiao would use his daggers to destroy the others. He activated his spiritual control, and over the course of his training, he had improved it. Now it didn't require so much energy, and it lent itself to control better. The boy noticed that the defenses were weakening, and from the other side, monsters began to make their way in. Though the dagger was small, she easily dealt with these spies. Now it's time to counterattack. They can't defend forever. The small monster giants began to fear this boy's face so scary, and in just an instant, he used 3 daggers to destroy all the monsters that were there. Their blade even broke, and finally the danger was over, and the rest of the monsters that survived ran away somewhere. The children fell to the ground because they had spent a lot of energy. It was the hardest on Eli Li. Not only was his strength, but also his vitality drained out of his body. He was exhausted. He made a promise to himself that after he left the tower, he would never do it again in his life. Ling Shi turned to the big man, only he was able to do it, as XYO didn't possess such magic. Since his element was fire, he was able to cook a ham for everyone to eat. And here, it would seem that nothing else threatens them, and they can rest easy after such a difficult battle. But another danger awaited them. The monster, which had not appeared on the battlefield before, came to them making terrible sounds, which frightened the boys. Very late that night, Snow's mom went to visit the very old man who had taken all of the boys' magazines. Upon seeing her, the man immediately got down on his knee. He sincerely apologized to her for not being able to protect her and her son from that scoundrel Lao Wan. He felt that he deserved to die for such a thing. She didn't like such a gesture much. After all, in fact, this old man was also wanted all over the continent, and all because of the girl. And now he's hiding in this nursing home, but he didn't care that they were looking for him. He had learned important information from the head of the university, because the girl has been hiding for 5 years, and now they want to find her by resorting to the help of robbers and announce the price of her on the black market. She became very worried about the reputation of the university in case she would suffer because of it. It didn't matter, for long ago, back in the old man's youth, the head of the university had been saved by him and was now permanently indebted to him. He invited her inside, since he already knew why she was here. The girl told the old man about her worries. She had not seen her son for a whole day and knew where he was. By the fact that a 5-year-old was sent to the Tower of Lost Souls, the old man was greatly angered and felt that the provost had overstepped his bounds. And so he contacted his battle comrades, and they were also willing to help him attack the tower and free her son. One of them was called the Iceman because of his magic. The other was a golden lion, and he had a special magic. They immediately set off, and the ice old man summoned a large snake composed of ice to get there faster. And when they arrived, they were already waiting there. It was the vice-rector himself and other mentors. The Golden Lion and the Iceman immediately remembered the past and shouted something to the provost that he may have forgotten. How they had beaten his ass as a child. The provost had great respect for them and remembered all their lessons. But today, He-Chan-Fen could not let them go any further, for the raid on the tower goes very much against the rules. The other mentors began to chuckle, knowing that their boss was always strict, but had once been kicked in the ass as a kid. Then the organizer of the rescue operation jumped down from the snake and said that enough time was wasted. It was necessary to start rescuing children. At the same time in the tower, this monster began to emit a very scary roar, which greatly frightened the children. Chiao called everyone back to his room to prepare for the monster's attack and try to hold it off with his shield. But this monster was very huge, and with just one strike, it was able to smash the entire defense. This animal had its eye on the strongest of them, most likely because it sensed his power and wanted to get rid of him first. And the NWS was in a desperate situation, so the Lin SI had to resort to extreme measures. Removing her choker, she broke the seal restraining her mutation. In frenzy mode, the blood she had inherited from the orcs boiled, and her body developed quickly, and her suit was specifically designed to stretch for it. But she didn't have much time, only 20 seconds. TJO tried to hold back his claws with his small shield, but it lacked strength and was slowly starting to crack. The girl realized that even with the increase in strength, she couldn't handle the monster. But in those 20 seconds, she could at least save the boy. With a claw of destruction, she left deep wounds on the monster's arm. Lei Lai decided to provoke the following attacks on himself so that those two could escape. Chiao put the bell back around the girl's neck, but now she needed time to rest and regain her strength. Lei was shocked. The monster's strength was immense, and a single blow would be enough to break his bones. But this creature had another ability. It could spit its tongue like a frog. He dodged as best he could, but in an instant she had him cornered, and the next attack would be his last. Then Xiao thought of a way to distract the monster and summoned a remote control car from the ground, and using the siren on it, he began to distract it. Xiao shouted for Lei to hide behind any column and not move, because frogs are animals that can't see well and only pay attention to moving objects. Lei did not believe him. Everything was strange and new to him. After all, he had never seen such machines, and he didn't have the usual school that Snap had once had. But Xiao knew a lot about these animals. He really liked it when his teacher talked about it. What he remembered from his classes was that frogs have 2 baked eyes and are very sensitive to movement. But as soon as an object is frozen, they will stop seeing it as if blinded. The monster grabbed the machine and was about to dainty with it, while LA stood too close to it and shuddered. And after that, it immediately hit this pole, but it continued to stand there. It must have been an accidental impact. It completely lost him from its sight, but Lei pouted a little in his pants out of fear. At the same time, the battle between the teachers and the old men on the street was beginning. They activated their spirit power, which put a lot of pressure on the opponents. The provost told his subordinates to activate suppression no lower than level 12. After all, those 3 alone had once fought against the entire continent. Their energies collided. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to resist such power. The Golden Tiger began to remove his robes so that they wouldn't get in the way of the battle. He thought that he would not have to make physical contact, but apparently they were not as strong as before. Then, one of the mentors immediately attacked with a purple fire transformation spell and turned into a fiery phoenix that moved behind the back of one of the old men with great speed. Activating his power with ease, he easily grabbed that bird when it was about to strike him. The old man was greatly angered that he attacked him from the back, for according to his principles, the fight should be face to face. The Iceman wasn't going to stand by either, and activated his magic, assuming that he would soon be attacked as well. He launched his magic at them and restrained the movements of some of the opponents. They didn't even have time to react because of such a fast speed. The provost dodged this attack, also launched his hurricane roar spell at them. To Teacher Bima, it seemed like some kind of joke, and there was no way such a faint breeze could pierce through his divine shield. Then the provost realized that such an attack could not penetrate it. He used a point impact and hit the veil with his fist, which was very effective, and the shield began to crack. It greatly surprised the old man that some guy was able to destroy such a barrier with his bare hands. The provost found out a little information about the old man. It turned out he used to be a teacher at this university, but 5 years ago, he left and pretended to be just a guest at the nursing home. Then the old man didn't let him finish and also started attacking. Their blows created a large and strong wave that spread out for hundreds of meters. But suddenly, they heard a strange cry right from within the tower's lofts. And then Steo's mom started to panic a lot. It was the scary sounds that kept her going.